Right, good afternoon to you all, and a warm welcome to this standing committee or this ad hoc committee of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. Today we will be meeting on the theme protection of the vulnerable. It is our most vulnerable in our society that are in greatest need of our protection. So today's meeting we are considering those individuals in our province, our children, those especially those children with no guardians, with women and mothers who are being abused, those with no homes, those that are sick from addiction, as well as our society's elderly. So those will be the themes of today. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to the members present. I've received advice that we are quorate. I'd also like to welcome the ministers, the heads of department, the Provincial Police Commissioner, as well as the officials in attendance, and I'll get round to introducing each one shortly. I would like to table an apology for Honourable Bosman, who's not able to attend the meeting this morning. This afternoon, Honourable Lorraine Buerta will be the permanent representative in his place. And I note that we've also received an apology from Honourable Dugmore. I'm not sure if there is an alternate in his place. Honourable Lecker. Okay. Then if I could just briefly talk to the rules of engagement for this virtual meeting. As usual, all members are muted at the start of the meeting to avoid background noises. Members are to please raise points of order using the chat function, and that is the only purpose of the chat function, is to raise points of order or speaking turns, please. All video and audio should please be switched off, which will help improve the quality of the connection. However, if a member, minister, HOD or official is speaking, they may put on their mic and video. Participants should please switch off their mics once they have finished speaking, as well as to stop sharing presentations once the presentation has concluded. I'm going to divide the meeting into two parts. The first part of the meeting, we will have the South African Police Service in the Western Cape, as well as the Western Cape Government Department of Social Development, around the issues of domestic violence, protection of the elderly, homeless, children, drug addiction assistance, and the elderly, if I haven't mentioned that already. We will then have a Q&A on both of those inputs from those two departments, and then we'll move to the second part of the meeting where we will be hearing from the Unemployment Insurance Fund as well as SASSA in the Western Cape. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Lieutenant General Matakata, the Provincial Police Commissioner. Thank you very much, ma'am, for being here this afternoon and for presenting to the Western Cape Ad Hoc Committee. Would you be able to introduce your officials present before we begin?
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon to everyone. With me is General Amanli, who is the Deputy Provincial Commissioner for Visible Policing in the province. I have Brigadier Forscale, and then I have Colonel Foslo also from the Visible Environment, and I have Colonel Fink, who is dealing with the subject matter that we're talking to today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, General. We thank you again for preparing the presentation. If you'd like to make some introductory remarks, please feel welcome to do so. And then if we could proceed to the presentation. Once the presentation is concluded, we will then introduce the Social Development Department, have their presentation, and we'll have the questions after that. We also welcome all of the members of the public that are joining us via the YouTube link. General, thank you very much, and over to you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I just want to say briefly, thank you for the invitation on this critical subject. And also it will be also an honor for us to share the information that is being requested, and perhaps it would assist in a long way for also the members of the public to have a better understanding, and also for us to get any questions that would assist greatly in explaining our role and any other information that is required from us. And having said that, I will then request that Brigadier Foskale will take us through the presentation, and as soon as he finishes, we will be guided by your direction as to what would happen after the presentation is finished. Thank you.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. If I can commence, just an overview of what we will be covering in the presentation today. I will give an overview of the legislative framework. Then I will clarify some issues around protection orders and the roles that we perform. We will cover the intervention to access the courts for domestic violence protection orders. Then we will give an analysis or a breakdown of the protection orders which we've received, as well as the cases reported for the lockdown period, commencing from the 27th of March this year to the 27th of April. We will then indicate the assistance and the support which we as the South African Police Services are obliged to provide to victims of these incidents. We will cover the intervention to the courts and then the challenges as well. If we can proceed, thank you. Just in terms of the legislative framework, we are guided by the Domestic Violence Act, Act 116 of 1998, and this imposes certain obligations on a member of the South African Police Service who receives a complaint relating to domestic violence. We are then further guided by National Instruction 7 of 1999, which provides direction on responding to complaints of domestic violence, as well as giving a breakdown of the functions that need and the responsibilities of all station commanders, community service center commanders, as well as all members of the South African Police Service. Next. Madam Chair, just in terms of protection orders and the clarification of roles, I think what is important to note is that the issuing of protection orders, whether it be an interim order or a final order, is the sole responsibility of the courts. The South African Police Service is not the primary entity for the serving of protection orders. The serving of such is prescribed in terms of the regulations under the Domestic Violence Act, Regulation 15, and this regulation indicates that this must be done without delay and is effected by, in essence, three particular parties. One, the clerk of the court, who must hand or present a certified copy of the document to the person on whom the document is to be served, or send a certified copy of the document to that person by registered mail and endorse the original document to this effect. Secondly, the obligation is on the sheriff in terms of the provisions of the Magistrates Courts Act. And thirdly, on a peace officer, i.e. then like a police official, in terms of the CPA or Criminal Procedure Act relating to the serving of subpoenas. Next. Next slide.
Is that the correct one?
That's correct. It's the
No.
next slide. Thank you. In terms of the analysis of protection orders received and cases reported for the reporting period 27th of March to the 27th of April, which is approximately 1 month, we've received from the courts a total of 420 final protection orders. In terms of that which we've served on respondents, a total of 364. You'll see there's an amount of roughly about 54 which are still to be served. And there are a number of reasons for that not as of yet been served. Those include the inability to trace the respondent not being at home, the address not being correct, etc. Then in terms of interim protection orders, which we've received from the court for this period, a total of 1,045. The interim protection orders reserved on respondents is a total of 900. You'll see there's an additional 145 that still needs to be served. And again, for the same reasons, unable to trace the respondent, the person not being at home, or the address not being correct, as an example. In terms of domestic violence related cases that have been opened, there is a total of 1,891 cases for this month. The majority of these cases, as you can see, emanate from two particular clusters, Mitchell's Plain cluster, as well as the Blue Downs cluster. With regard to the number of domestic related complaints, and I think it's important to note, you'll see there's the one is actual cases that have been opened, and the other one are complaints that have been received. A total of 2,928 in the province for the month. And again, the majority of these complaints emanate from two clusters, the Mitchell's Plain cluster, and you can see there's a correlation with the related cases, and then also from the Eden cluster, which is your garden route. Thank you. Next slide. In terms of the assistance that SAPS provides to victims, there are a number of key aspects that we are responsible for. The first is we need to secure the scene of that domestic violence. We are then obligated to provide assistance to the complainant by assisting to find suitable shelter and or obtaining the necessary medical treatment. In terms of our standing operating protocols, we need to provide the complainant with a particular notice called a Form 1, as well as inform the complainant of their rights and options available in terms of the Domestic Violence Act. It's important to note that the South African Police Service members have specific powers and duties that are encapsulated within the Domestic Violence Act. These are: 1, we may seize firearms and dangerous weapons in terms of a court order. We may arrest a person without a warrant if the circumstances warrant such an arrest. We may arrest a person with a warrant who contravenes the protection order, and if there are reasonable grounds to suspect that the complainant may suffer imminent harm as a result of the alleged breach of the protection order by the respondent. We are entitled to serve documents or protection orders, and we may accompany complainants, as we do in many cases, to collect personal property in terms of the court order. And then just administratively, we are required to keep records of incidents with regard to domestic violence. Those are particular record-keeping books or registers, the 508A as well as B, and the occurrence book and the pocket book. Next. During this period, I think in terms of the access to courts and for protection orders, I think we experienced a number of challenges. This came to our attention as complainants indicated they had difficulty accessing particular courts for the obtaining of protection orders. 2, the volunteers, in many cases, what the NPO, the Mosaic volunteers, responsible for assisting applicants, were denied access in certain cases to court buildings. What was pleasing that upon receiving and these issues coming to the attention of particular departments, provincial departments, Department of Social Development, as well as Department of Community Safety, made contact with the South African Police Service, and an immediate virtual meeting was convened. Invited to attend the meeting were SAP's senior role players, Department of Justice, as well as the Department of Social Development. I think there were some positive resolutions that came out of that meeting. These included that the Provincial Department of Justice would immediately liaise with court managers to ensure access for complainants, as well as for the Mosaic volunteers to the courts. Secondly, a protocol was established which stipulated that challenges arising will be reported immediately to the relevant role players for intervention. And we followed up on that, and that kind of communication and communicate and interaction has taken place between DOJ and the various court managers, and that problem has been resolved. Next slide. I think, Madam Chair, in terms of the challenges we're experiencing and have experienced over the last month, is one with regard to the courts. All domestic violence related court cases have been postponed, except the most serious incidents, which will relate to issues of assault GBH, attempted murder, etc. But those relating to things like criminal injury, common assault have all been postponed. Secondly, we have experienced that no final or interim protection orders have been received from certain courts in the province. Thirdly, we have a scenario where certain periodical courts, those which we term predominantly more in your smaller, more rural areas, that are mobile courts in essence, are closed until further notice. Fourthly, and this issue has been resolved, the issue of people not being assisted at court due to security officers turning them away and not allowing them to go to the domestic violence office. That was the intervention which we had with the Department of Justice as well as Social Development. So that fourth issue has been resolved. I think the final commentary we'd want to make, Madam Chair, is that the reduction, and there has been a significant reduction in the number of reported cases and domestic violence related incidents in the province. And I want to emphasize the reported number. What we can say, it cannot be ascribed to a sudden change in behavior or conduct, but is more likely as a result of the unintended consequence of the national lockdown. Namely, three things. One, there's been a restriction on the movement of people. Two, there's constant close proximity to the perpetrator, which makes it far more difficult to report. And three, the issues around the non-availability and the restrictions around public transport have further made it difficult to report these incidents. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Brigadier Voskuil, for the presentation. I would now like to welcome the Department of Social Development. Welcome, Minister Fernandez, and welcome, Head of Department, Dr. McDonald. If you would like to make some introductory remarks and introduce your teams, please.
Good afternoon, Chairperson, to the honourable members, to the Police Commissioner and the delegation from SAPS, as well as members of the public. It is an honour to be able to present on issues that affect the vulnerable, that will guide us through the presentation. And I would immediately want to ask Dr. McDonald to introduce the rest of the team. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Dr. McDonald. Please proceed.
Thank you, Chair, and to everybody. I just quickly introduce the department officials on this call. We have Mr. Charles Jordan, the Chief Director for Welfare Services, and we also have Mr. Lionel Arnolds, Director for Community Development, and Ms. Marion Johnson, Chief Director for Business Planning and Strategy, and myself and Minister. Mr. Jordan will proceed with the presentation, if that's in order with you, Chair.
Yes, please. Please do proceed.
Mr. Jordan, I think you're muted.
We can see the presentation, but we can't hear anything at the moment.
Good day, can everybody hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now, thank you.
Okay, good. Thank you very much, Chairperson, for the opportunity for the department to present. Chairperson, I'm not going to do a full screen here because we've picked up that when we do full screens of our PowerPoint presentations, it somehow along the line cuts out. So if you don't mind as Chair, that I presented the way you can see it right now.
That's absolutely fine. You can proceed as it is.
Thank you very much.
If I could just ask that, sorry, before you proceed, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, sure.
If I could just ask all participants to turn off their cameras, as it helps us to get a better connection, please. Thank you. Please proceed.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chair. The presentation we're going to do today is looking at various kinds of vulnerable groups. So if I look at the contents, I will first speak a little bit towards the support of victims of violence during lockdown. Then the second point is going to be about the older persons at risk. Then the third one is going to be support to the shelters for the homeless. And then also the fourth one, support to children during lockdown. And then a bit about support to substance abuse, and then just one short slide about the NGOs that we pay. So all of these functions is welfare functions within the Department of Social Development, and I will first start with the support to victims of violence. So the Department of Social Development, we fund various NGOs that specialize in gender-based violence. That's still very much fully operational during lockdown, all of these services. So this services includes the operations of the shelters for the survivors, as well as psychosocial support to victims of domestic violence via our NGOs, as well as our DSD officers who's providing the services. So in total, we've got about 20 shelters operating right now with 394 bed spaces. Then we've also got about 20 NGOs providing therapeutic interventions for our survivors with regards to domestic violence. And this is organizations like Rape Crisis and Mosaic, as I've just mentioned to this example. Then also the Tutuzela centers are fully operational. Although we're not the lead department on Tutuzela centers, we do provide a great support to those centers. Now, if I just look specifically, just for interest's sake, at the cost, so the cost is about 46 million rand for us operating these NGOs and shelters for victims of violence. And then also just to confirm that all of our DSD officers are operational to provide also services and interventions when required. I think the main thing is that with the regulations, when we started with lockdown, the National Department of Social Development issued guidelines to all the provinces, and that was Circular 2 of 2020. And that guidelines that we have to follow quite strictly is, number one, that no victims from the shelters to be released from these facilities. Also, no visitations during that period, so no family members or friends can come and visit. Then suspension of family reunification and interaction programs. And then if there's any new admissions that will be processed, provided that the facility then comply with the COVID-19 regulations. And this is all the stuff with regards to protective gear and hygienic protocols and so forth. And then there must be a social worker's report that deems it fit for the processing of the specific victim. Yes, and I've mentioned the next point was the health-related issues. Following that protocols. I think it's also very important to notice on the next slide that we have developed, with the Western Cape shelter movement, we've developed protocols specifically for victims of gender-based violence and domestic violence coming to the shelters. So in the shelter process, we've got a stage 1 and a stage 2 according to these protocols. So stage 1, we do have 5 shelters specifically accommodating survivors and victims for that phase. So they admit at-risk victims of crime and violence. Only referrals with a social worker risk assessment and SAPS referral will be accepted. And then they are accommodated for the first 13 days in the stage 1 shelter. During this lockdown period, we had a total of 44 people who were admitted at our stage 1 shelters, and that was 21 adults, females, and then 23 children that comes with their single parents or the mother. It's not necessary to say it's a single parent. Then stage 2, we've got 16 shelters dealing with the stage 2. So clients were transferred to stage 2 accommodation after the initial 14 days of stage 1. Only clients referred by stage 1 shelters are accommodated. And SAPS very kindly assists us with the transport of the clients from stage 1 to stage 2 shelters. The Department of Health assists us with the medical screening and medical needs of these clients. Hence, it's essential also that all our shelters must work closely with the nearest health facility or clinic. Then the statistics for this period is that a total of 15 people were moved from stage 1 to stage 2 during lockdown. At the shelters, the budget provides 3 daily meals. We've got 20 social workers working on these sites, plus 15 social auxiliary workers, and we've got 60 house mothers working in shifts at the shelters. At the capacity as of at the 28th of April, which was Monday, 27 vacant beds we still had at stage 1 shelters, and we had 44 vacant beds in stage 2 shelters. The NGOs and our DSD offices, if we look at their psychosocial support, we provided psychosocial support to 2,354 people on crimes of violence during this period. I must, however, add that it also includes follow-up cases. So part of our process is that if you're a client that we debrief and assist, it takes at least another 6 cases after that we need to debrief and support you as a client that's gone through domestic violence. So some of those clients, part of that 2,354 is clients that we were already busy debriefing and psychosocial support, providing that already before lockdown. So we're still continuing doing that during lockdown. The Tutuzela care centres, as I've mentioned earlier on, is fully operational. And in this period up till the 28th, we had a total of 183 cases being dealt with during this period. And I've done the breakdown, and it was 73 adults and 110 children. A little bit alarming, the number there. Very much positive news that we got, and that we're very fortunate also, is that the National Department of Public Works and Infrastructure made available 6 shelters for the Western Cape province. So they provided the buildings and stuff, and we got a letter from Minister de Lille's office about a day or 2 ago that the upgrading and maintenance of these shelters are being done by National from the 28th of April till the 8th of May. And I have indicated the location where we're going to put this where these shelters are, and this is absolutely needed areas, and it's in Albertina, Heidelberg, Laingsburg, Aurora, there's 2 buildings, and then Mariatsburg. So as all members, honourable members can see, it's rural areas, which is a great need. Then DSD is currently in the process to obtain specialised service providers to render services at these new shelters. Coming to an end on this topic, the challenges. We do experience shortages of protective gear, such as masks and so forth. Then also the other thing that concerned us a lot was the clients that they cannot exit the shelter due to lockdown. So the impact of this could be that no bed spaces may be available by the end of April. But I have had some talks, and I think the remedial actions, yes, requirements with respect to protective gear have been submitted to National DSD. I can gratefully say that quite a few things did arrive. Gloves and masks will be delivered by the 30th of April, which is today. So we're waiting for the stuff to come in, and I'm sure it's come in already. So there is going to be lots of protective gear that we can distribute to NGOs. Then also, I have been informed by the National DDG from Social Development. They are looking at relaxing the guidelines with regards to releasing the clients after the 30th of April. In other words, women and victims that could have left already and that have a possibility of being reunified, that they will or can be released. So we did not get that final confirmation. I know it's going to be discussed, or they are discussing it today at the National Joints meeting. So hopefully very soon we will get guidance on that, so that we can actually then open some more spaces. The next topic is support our older persons. DSD funds various old age homes, specializing in care support services to older persons. We've got a total of 120 old age homes we fund, 9,323 bed spaces at a cost of 206 million rand. Various other older persons NGOs are right now also still providing therapeutic services, such as Dementia South Africa and Age in Action. Mentioned once again, our DSD office is also operational, so they also assist. The service centres, however, have been closed during lockdown period. That's the luncheon clubs that people always refer to. So unfortunately, that was also an issue that was raised, but I understand why it's been decided, that decision by National, because the older persons are the most at risk if you look at all of these vulnerable groups when it comes to contracting the virus. So the guidelines we received from National, specifically with regards to the old age homes, no clients to be released from the facilities, no visitations at all to the older persons, suspension of family reunification and interaction programs are not allowed, and no new admissions, but we are allowed exceptions when an older person is in distress. And that could be specifically an older person that maybe could have landed up on the street because the family have rejected them. That will be persons in distress. And then with a social service report, we will then be able to take them up, but isolate them for at least 14 days. As mentioned, the service centres have been closed. Then old age homes as independent entities. Now, what are we all doing? They're following strict health and hygienic protocols as prescribed. So there has been the World Health Organization's prescripts has been taken. Then we've also had a lot of support from Department of Health. So all of those prescripts are being followed. Then you've got mother bodies such as RCFF, Cape Peninsula Old Age Association and Badisa. Amongst that three, they've got about easily 80 old age homes amongst themselves. They have developed also their own protocols with regards to hygiene. Nutritional meals are provided 3 times a day. Psychosocial support services are provided on site. Medication and all other essentials are still being provided by the Department of Health medical depots where they get those medication from. Staff screen daily when they enter. Department of Health, we've been in talks with Department of Health Western Cape, and we are busy looking at the whole process of actually screening every resident in all of the old age homes that's on our list. The unfortunate position is that 2 cases so far have been reported that's been tested positive. The one was in a flatlet or a house in a private retirement village, and the other one was in a flat in a community housing project. Unfortunately, I cannot mention those areas right now for confidentiality, but those places, Department of Health has come immediately and they have tested everybody in that and tracked everybody in that area when those cases were identified. The challenges also stock, but once again, fantastically to say, happy to say that there's lots of stock that came in today. So a lot of sanitizers we're going to start distributing to all the old age homes. I think the biggest challenge for the older persons is the whole issue of isolation from their families and communities. It's psychologically very emotionally tiring if you cannot see your family, especially at that age. So that's one of the issues we need or busy dealing with and assisting as far as possible. So remedial actions, I have talked about the sanitizers and masks. Department of Health also indicated that they will help us with more protective gear. Then also we've had quite a few donors coming forward to donate, which we will receive also as from today being delivered. As a matter of fact, I saw actually them delivering the face shields on some group. I saw it coming through the pictures. With regards to the isolation, we do encourage the families, or we will contact them to say, please make contact with the person in the home, at least as long as they can just hear them and talk to them. So that's the main thing we're doing there. Shelter for the homeless is the next topic. DSD funds 27 shelters at a cost of 19.8 million rand. So this budget allows us for this 27 shelters to provide 3 daily meals, 2 social work supervisors is on site, 22 social workers and 4 social auxiliary workers is working on these sites. With respect to the lockdown, an additional family shelter was established by our department in Somerset West that can accommodate up to 120 family members. I must say that's sometimes an issue that's quite concerning. You do get families, and I'm very happy that we were placed in the position to open the shelter in a question of a few days. It's going quite well there with regards to the operations there. Then the whole question of the temporary shelters. Municipalities have also established their own temporary shelters, and they receive food from NGOs appointed by the National Department of Social Development. The Western Cape DSD and NGOs, we provide psychosocial support when required at these shelters. Now, these temporary shelters are accommodating in total 1,807 in the rural areas. And City of Cape Town's municipal temporary sites, they've got a few sites, about 4 or 5. And that totals come up to 2,569. Honourable Chair, I will be able to provide lists if the members would like to see the list of where these sites are. I just didn't have space on the PowerPoint presentation, but we do have that. Then the next point, DSD funded shelters. This is operated by NPOs, and that accommodates 2,003 people. So in total currently, and I must add these numbers differ from day to day, because some of the homeless people do leave the buildings, and some of them would want to go back to the street. But currently we have about 6,681 homeless persons in all the shelters. It's full capacity, and this includes now the temporary sites of the municipalities. Then the following measures that we do at our DSD funded shelters. We've got universal precaution measures with special focus on standards of hygiene. All persons entering a shelter to be screened, and we follow hygiene practices. We do have sufficient space between beds. That's about 1.5 meters. Space for self-quarantine and isolation is in our shelters. We had to suspend the visits by family members and some other external service providers. Networking with local clinics for the testing and referral for medical services is still ongoing. That has not stopped, obviously, for very good reasons. Then we also do information sharing with homeless adults. We strengthen their personal hygiene practices. And we also render, by the social workers, they render psychosocial support services during this lockdown period. The challenges, some homeless people do not want to remain in the shelter environment. Some homeless adults do suffer from psychiatric disorders and or addictions and are unable to adjust to a confined environment. The number of homeless people at shelters I've mentioned do vary on a regular basis. Provision of mattresses, blankets, and other relief goods poses sometimes to be a risk due to the theft of these goods. Then the legal uncertainty around roles and responsibilities in terms of running the shelters and on whether people in the shelters are allowed to leave. That is a challenge. And then the regulatory requirement for temporary shelters may not be compatible with the need to decongregate people. and maintain social distancing during the lockdown. And here I'm specifically referring to Strandfontein, although we've done quite a lot of support there, and I'm sure we can answer a bit more on that when we get to Q&A. Then the remedial actions, DSD and NGOs in constant contact with municipal officials and dealing with all referrals for psychosocial support. NGOs have come forward to provide additional support on temporary sites where needed. SALGA has written to National DG of Social Development requesting engagement on legal clarity around the roles and responsibility of different spheres of government in relation to homeless shelters, and guidance are still awaited from National DSD. Then I think the most important thing is we're ready to start thinking now already of post-lockdown when it comes to the homeless people. And all services will commence full on as we did before lockdown, such as food provision, psychosocial support, family reunification, skills development, because we've got various skills development programs running too. And all of that will kick in immediately as the moment when lockdown is over. Then the support for children during lockdown. So currently, I'm going to break this into two parts. One part is the child and youth care centres. It's the word that everybody sometimes uses, orphanages and so forth, but we call it, according to the Act, child and youth care centres. There's 53 of them, managed by NGOs, and then we've got our own 9 care secure centres. That's in line with the Child Justice Act. We've got in our facilities, there's 53 child and our own care secure centres. We've got 4,450 children that's currently in lockdown in all of these facilities. Then during this period of lockdown, a total of 8 children that was at high risk was admitted into one of these facilities. So the current lockdown guidelines that we do follow for the children's care secure centres and children's youth centres is that no children to be released from the facilities, no visitation, suspension of family reunification, no new admissions, once again, unless a child is declared in need of care and protection. And then also there must be a social worker report with all of that. Then the necessary standard operating procedures. We did develop a SOP for the prevention and management of COVID-19 within the DSD centres. And this SOP addresses issues such as staff and children's screenings, daily hygiene protocols, assessments for children displaying sicknesses. I must admit we're very fortunate no positive cases of children identified as yet in any of these centres. But I think it's because of the strict processes that we do follow. If I look at child protection from another angle, because I talked about the residential facilities now, then we have got additionally 220 NGOs renting support services to children and families at the cost of about 270 million rand. Then also our own offices, DSD's own office, we've got 45 local offices and quite a few more satellite offices, but we've got staff rendering still services to children and families during this lockdown period. All of these services have been declared as essential services. So if I look at childcare services, this refers to services that safeguard and promote the overall well-being of a child. If it includes, but it's not limited to, the protection of children from abuse, exploitation and other forms of harm, and ensuring that the best interests are of paramount concern. In the unfortunate event of a child being abused in the home, a safety assessment will be done. Removal will occur only if it's vital to the child's immediate safety. We also do still render psychosocial support services. Psychosocial support describes a wide range of care, support and protection that aims to ensure the social, spiritual, emotional and psychological well-being of families and are mostly conducted on a preventative level. Psychosocial support programs in this context are risk-informed and rendered to families to strengthen their capacity to deal with this stressful disaster. Special caution will be taken to apply social distancing, and the use of social media or even telephonic counselling is also a process how we do the psychosocial support services. Psychosocial support responds to and protects the child from abuse, exploitation and psychological stress, even associated with a disaster of this nature. Then part of this support of children, we're also looking at the family holistically. So access to trauma counseling, integration and reunification services to persons affected to mitigate stigmatization. We do find in certain townships and places that there is stigmatization when it comes to somebody being tested positive. So that's also support that we render there. Then assessment of families at risk will also be appropriate to refer as a whole family specifically for early intervention services. And then parents are also empowered in terms of the responsibilities and rights towards child rearing amidst the closure of the ECD centres and schools. So it's been a very stressful period also for parents while the ECD centres and the schools are closed. So we also provide that support when needed or requested. And also, once again, we do it through social media and other electronic methods. It does not say that social workers do not go out. In the high-risk cases, we do also send people out, but obviously with protective gear and so forth. During lockdown, we've got drop-in centres and HIV organisations that we fund. Your HIV organisations look specifically at child-headed households. So there's a full support system in place for these children, and the drop-in centres also look as it's like a sort of a one-stop centre where any child can come and family member can come with a child. And here we're supporting families and children with hygiene, once again, psychosocial support services from these facilities. We do refer people from those centres for medical attention if needed. From the centres and from these HIV organisations, food parcels are also distributed. And as mentioned, the HIV organisations specifically look at child-headed households. There is also a protocol in its final breathing moments of being approved between DSD and Department of Health. And here it's a referral protocol on the psychosocial support for people at isolation and quarantine sites, putting out the full process of when people are taken up in isolation or a quarantine site, the whole referral process for that psychosocial support Department of Social Development will provide. Statistics, essentially statutory services are still referred to the courts. So we still are in contact with the children's courts. So they're still operating with high risk cases. So number of child abuse cases that was reported in this period was 107 and number of children removed was 60. Challenges, removal of children and their parents to isolation sites and quarantine sites was a problem at the beginning. Additional accommodation bed space for children has been assessed and being at risk, and that needs to be removed from parents' families during lockdown. So remedial action is disaster management, develop protocols. The MES unit transport the children and parents to the hospital for testing and then place them thereafter at isolation quarantine sites. So that's the protocol. Social workers will follow in a separate vehicle to provide psychosocial support if needed. Then also we have additional bed spaces we've created throughout the province for children that's at risk and that needs placement. And then also one of our facilities, we have created another 30-bed space to accommodate children with that need. Substance abuse, this is the last topic of my presentation. There is 6 inpatient treatment centres that we fund at a cost of 90 million rand. And right now it provides beds for 726 people, and it's usually within a 6 to 9 week treatment cycle. The national guideline is that no clients to be released from the facilities, and this is posing to be a problem. No visitation from families, suspension of family reunification, no new admissions except if a court orders somebody needs to be involuntarily be committed to an inpatient treatment centre. 90% of our cases are voluntary. So there's about 10% of cases that's been committed by the court. The services provided by the centres have been declared essential and workers should be allocated prescribed permits. The challenges here is that clients that should have exited this treatment program cannot do so due to the lockdown regulations. Then also the substance abuse support for homeless at City of Cape Town's temporary shelters was a challenge for us. But as I've mentioned earlier on at National Joints meeting, our national department is going to talk about exiting of clients, and that's going to be clients out of the abused women shelters, plus out of the treatment centres. So all the clients that's completed their programs and that could have been reunified It's looking at that whole process of actually releasing, and releasing sounds so horrible, but yeah, it's not a prison. But this is basically where we are. So we do hope that that message comes positive through, that clients that needs to be released and be reunified back to their families, that it happens as soon as possible. Obviously having processes in place, because if you're being reunified with a family, that family also needs to be screened and tested so that the people go from a safe environment, screened already, into environment that's unfamiliar regarding screening. Then I must actually also say, as one of our remedial actions, our NGOs specifically that we fund community-based programs that's not inpatient. They run a community-based treatment programs and stuff. They've actually been quite a few of them came together, and they're supporting and rendering all that substance abuse services at the temporary shelter. So quite a lot of cases that we saw at the beginning has now been dealt with by NGOs assisting with that. My last slide. It is very important when it comes to the sustainability of the NGOs. So yes, we fund right now at 1,882 NPOs. We funded them already for the month of April at a cost of 91 million rand. We have not penalized a single NGO with regards to anything besides the things that unfortunately we could not help. Was 57 NGOs that was totally non-compliant since last year already with their audit financial statements. We're still busy trying to see how we can help them even in this lockdown period. Payments for May month, it's so to say loaded, ready. And I think our CFO has indicated that they will start releasing funds to our NGOs already next week. So that should assist them without having financial cash flows during this lockdown period. Thank you, Chair. That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. We're now going to move on to a round of questions as per our usual format. I'm going to recognize each party, and they will be given 3 minutes to make their inputs and pose questions. If you would kindly indicate which departments your questions are directed to. And before we do that, thank you very much to both SAPS and DSD for those presentations. Members, I'm going to start with the DA.
Thank you, Chairperson. Chairperson, my first question is directed to SAPS. Obviously, Chairperson, legislation guides us and it imposes certain obligations on a member of the police who receives a complaint of domestic violence, Chairperson. In the issuing of protection orders, whether it is interim or final, it is the sole responsibility of the courts. And if I heard the Brigadier correctly, he said none was received at this time. So one can just say, thank God, if that is the case. My question is, Chairperson, how many cases of domestic violence has been reported in the Western Cape since the commencement of lockdown? And Chairperson, one also wants to establish what the synergy is, and does it exist between the three departments, that is police, justice and social development? Because in order for us to determine those orders, whether they are there or they were reported, there needs to be synergy, especially from police's side with justice. Chairperson, we are in a state of business unusual and we are vastly connected to our new normal. So, of course, there are protocol in place regarding SAPS assistance provided to victims of domestic and gender-based violence. Chairperson, I would like to ask, what is the strategy that SAPS adopted in terms of arrests and support to these victims? Did SAPS provide additional training in order to manage this amidst of our COVID-19 environment? Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Philander. Are there any other questions from the DA?
Yes, Chairperson, specifically to the South African Police Service. It is Regan Allen.
Thank you, Honourable Allen. Please proceed.
Just to latch on to to what Member Philander asked, and I do understand that the DVA places several obligations on SAPS and other state departments regarding its implementation. But the challenges are so damning. I would like to know, was these challenges brought to the attention of other state departments and the courts by SAPS? And if so, was any resolution taken in that regard? I would also want to know regarding if a victim makes a way to a SAPS station, for example, will each and every SAPS station have a trained volunteer during the lockdown to assist in the victim support room? If so, are these volunteers declared an essential service? If not, why not? But also in the presentation, I just wanted clarity. The Brigadier stated that all domestic violence cases has been postponed except for the most serious. Does that mean that no protection orders were served within the targeted 48 hours? And what would qualify for the most serious? Would that only be sexual abuse, for example, or physical? If we can get some clarity on that. But because it leads to a scenario. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Allen.
Chair, can I proceed with DSD?
Unfortunately, the 3 minutes have expired, so if you would hold your question to the next round, please.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I recognise the ANC. Members, if you just say your name before you ask your questions and make your inputs, just so that the respondents know who's asking which questions. ANC?
Thank you, Chair. It's Member Kama.
Thank you, Honourable Kama. Please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Let me first welcome the two presentations from SAPS and DSD. My first question would be to SAPS Chair. I think they mentioned that they had around 1,891 domestic violence cases, and after that it was like 2,928 complaints. Now I want to check out of these how many of these constitute gender-based violence, and perhaps also taking from the 2,928, how do we? Is there any analysis that is done in terms of these complaints? Because we understand that some other people, although they went to the police, but they would not want to open a case. But what do we do? What analysis do we do? And is there a link to then others later coming to open cases? The other question I have, Chair, is to DSD. I see that most of the work that was in the presentation is done through your NGOs and your shelters. Now I want to understand, Chair, as to how do we reach or support an older person, let's say, that is in Elsis River but is not linked to any particular NGO or shelter. That's it for now. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Kama. Any further questions from the ANC?
Thank you, Chair. This is Member Nkondlo.
Please proceed, Honourable Nkondlo.
Thank you, Chair. To SAPS, my first question, I just want to understand on the cases that they've mentioned to date, in the police station, do we have the victim support units still very active, and do all of them have the rape kits in those police stations? And again, what is the implication of the lockdown for those members or those who are experiencing gender-based violence who may not be able to move and go to a police station to report the case? And would that be one of the things that had actually created this low reporting of gender-based violence cases? And if I may quickly to DSD, I just wanted to understand from the 20 shelters they mentioned, which it takes about 394 beds at 40 million rand. What exactly is the minimum cost of running a shelter per month? And lastly, Chair, they indicate that in terms of older persons at this point, all of those spaces or centers are compliant to the safety measures. Can I just check who does this particular check and who has confirmed, what exactly is the measure that is utilized to actually check that indeed the safety measures are being adhered to, which gives, I think, the department the confidence as they had declared that all these centers are fully compliant. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I recognize the EFF, Honourable Trejo. I'm not sure if he's still on the line. In the meantime, can we go over to Good, Honourable Heron?
Thank you, Chair. It's Brett Heron. My first question to SAPS is regarding the access to courts and access to assistance around protection orders. I think it was quite unnerving in a way to hear the report that there is a differentiation between levels of severity that someone has made with regards to whether a victim of domestic violence may approach the courts and SAPS. I mean, to make a differentiation between assault, GBH, and common assault, I think to me is absurd, especially as people are locked in and locked down. And I'm wondering what SAPS is doing. I mean, are you just accepting that that is the status quo? Are we lobbying with Department of Justice to change that? I mean, there was a message that I received 2 weeks ago that from someone who said, this is the message itself, went to Goodwood Magistrates Court today to apply for domestic violence protection order. Court has been closed since 26 March. Workers say it will reopen on 4th May. Went to SAPS and they say I must wait until the lockdown is over. Women are living in hell. So I don't think that that's an acceptable situation, and I think we need to make sure that that changes. Then to Department of DSD, I think we need to understand the homeless shelter situation and in particular Strandfontein, which has been widely condemned. Now, there were rumors circulating last night and this morning that it is to be closed, and I see in the presentation there is a bullet point that the shelter is to be closed. But what is to happen to the homeless people who are in that shelter, and how and where are they going to go? And I mean, the new regulations that were published last night still obliges the state to provide temporary shelters for homeless people until the end of the state of disaster. Now, I've seen videos that were sent to me earlier today of people leaving the camp almost en masse. So can DSD please tell us what the plan is for those people? Where will they be going to, and how will they be accommodated in accordance with the new regulations that were published yesterday? Thank you so much.
Thank you. I recognize the ACDP, Honourable Christians.
Thank you, Chairperson. I've got maybe to SAPS, same questions, just very concerned about I'm specifically referring to the volunteers helping at police stations and attending to victim support. I believe in certain areas that is a major problem when it comes to victim support. Volunteers cannot get to their places where they serve. Maybe just elaboration on that, and will it change now under level 4? Another one for SAPS is also now with people getting, the other members did mention it, but it's concerning that perpetrators, of course, at home are thriving on the vulnerable because the victims, cannot escape anymore. And so it's this verbal abuse, this mental abuse, and they cannot go to get a order to get away from this mental abuse. It's not physical, but it's mental. If the brigadier can just enlighten us on that, will that now be if it's mental abuse, people going on and and on because they cannot get out of home. That lady cannot get out of home. That child cannot get out of home. What remedies can we put in place there? And I know the enforcers of the law. I mean, they don't make the laws. And then to DSTV, the Department of Social Development, DST, just the homeless. Also, the problem with the home. You have these shelters where the homeless usually pay 18 rand. I think it's 18 rand a night. And what they usually do, they stand on the streets and they get the money, they go into the shelter, and then they're out the next day again. Can DSTV just tell me, those people have that sort of independence, and now they permanently are they taken care of, and what is the process with them? Because a lot of people, as they said, a lot of people don't want to be in these shelters permanently. But we know when it comes to lockdown, it's important that we keep these people. A lot of the people are not happy. I just heard, because they don't have access to drugs and those type of things. And I'm not saying, but that's why they escape. What happens in a case like that when a person just leave a shelter or leave a camp? What happens? Is there any measures to follow up and those type of thing? And so Chair, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Recognize the Freedom Front Plus, Honourable Murray.
Thank you very much, Chair Lady. I have a few questions. I'll try to be brief. First of all, why is it that the 10111 number is still not up and going, and when will it be activated so that people can phone 10111 if they need to? Secondly, why don't you make use also of additional help from private security companies to assist in matters of this nature? Thirdly, there's justifiable reason that the husband should be removed and not the wife and children. Why must they be this inconvenienced if the husband is drunk or if the husband beats them about and their safety is at risk? Why uproot the woman with the 4 or 5 children and the husband can stay quite safely at home, enjoying all the benefits of the home, and they must go in some center that is foreign to the children? Think of the psychological damage to the kids. I believe the husband should be moved out and placed somewhere. That'll teach him a lesson. And then I also wanted to ask, the physical and mental side of abuse, is that addressed, or is the only thing that you want to do now is to have a sort of a protection order, which is still held in abeyance, and it's not final yet, only serious cases are considered and not the rest. But there are unintended consequences. There's the unavailability or non-availability of transport, you said. You mentioned it. You said the close proximity of the woman to the man. She is not going to let the whole story out if the cops leave, she's in danger. So why don't you take him out of the house? Why take the woman out? The woman will never tell the full story if she knows when the cops leave, she's in for one hell of a beating again. So these are questions that I think deserve to be answered. We have already activated Article 36 of the Constitution, suspending people's rights. You have stopped freedom of movement, freedom of association, freedom to conduct business. All these things are suspended. Why let the abusive husband retain his freedom? Stop his freedom of movement, take him away. I don't know if I have more time of my 3 minutes. If not, I will.
It has just expired.
Just expired. Thanks, I'm still alive. Thanks, God. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Murray. That concludes the first round of questions. General Matakata, would you like to respond first, please?
Thank you, Chairperson, and to the honorable members for the questions. I will have General Mani respond to the questions, and then we will all try and answer all those questions that have come to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, General. Thank you, honorable person. Thank you, honorable members. Allow me to start by answering the last question because it talks to our 10.1, which was closed. I just want to explain that our members are as susceptible to the virus and the situation as all other people. Therefore, when it was found that our members some of them have been in contact with people that were already positive, so it was imperative for us to test our members, and we tested all of our members. But we did actually put a system in place to divert the calls to 16 clusters, and we beefed up those clusters with more personnel so that all the calls are diverted. Now, the question is, when is the call center going to be reopened again? We are glad to report to you that the call center is going to be open tomorrow. That is the first. We've got all our systems ready to receive our members back. And we are also glad that all our members were tested, because there is also a psychological impact on our members as well. Remember, they are responsible for the safety of the whole province. So it was proper and fitting that they were tested, but they were coming back full force, and they're going to be serving the community. On the issue of removing the wife instead of the husband, at this stage in our country, honorable members, it is so that the policy in terms of the regulatory framework does not put on us the obligation to remove the husband. That is a situation, for instance, in Germany, where the police can, with the permission of the wife or girlfriend, remove the respondent. But in our situation, legal system, if it is necessary, we assist the complainant, which will be a wife and mostly women, though in some cases the complainant can also be a male, but that is very minimal. So we have to remove them to places of safety or to relatives, and also assist them with their property if it is necessary. That is what the law is putting on us as an obligation. The first question was on the issue of legislation, obligation on the police, and how many cases were reported. Now, as already done in the presentation, we are well versed with what are the obligations upon us. Even during this time of the lockdown, we have executed our duties, and we're here to report that 2,928 incidents were reported. Out of these incidents, 1,891 were cases. In other words, that is where there's elements of crime. It can be assault, common. It can be a rape. It can be assault GPH. It differs. It can be pointing of a firearm. It differs from case to case. And we are therefore guided, because the other question was, what is the arrest strategy? We are guided by the what we can do in terms of the Domestic Violence Act and regulations. We serve, in the first obligation is to inform the complainant of the rights, secure the scene, inform the complainant of the rights, and assist the complainant to get the protection order. And if there's no danger of imminent harm in protection order cases, we don't arrest the suspect on the spot, but there is an arrest which is always issued with a protection order, which is suspended. And we apply that protection order if there's a danger of imminent harm. So again, it differs from case to case. But where there's elements of rape and assault, GPH, firearms, we do there arrest the people, and they go through the processes of their arrest and also going to court in terms of docket management. That is what we do there. Challenges, as it was reported earlier on here, there was a virtual meeting with the Department of Social Justice, Department of Social Services, and also Department of Justice, and these things are dealt with jointly with the department. Volunteers, yes, we have volunteers in some stations. In other stations, we don't have volunteers. We have got domestic violence coordinators who are trained on a 24 hours. They are rendering service to the victims of crime. I will move on. There was a question that was asked by Honorable Nkondlo as well. It was, do we have victim-friendly facilities? I want to report that in all our stations, we do have victim-friendly facilities. They are fully functional 24 hours. We are assisted by social workers on availability per rosters that are there, and also volunteers. The problem with volunteers, I need to report to the chairperson that volunteers, sometimes they get employed, and then after when we get them, we train them, we're assisted by dogs and BAC. But it so happened that volunteers are people that will get employment and they diminish in numbers, and sometimes they will end up without having a volunteer at the station. But we always recruit them, train them, assisted by BAC as well and dogs, and they are also assisted in terms, because the other question, are they assisted in terms of, yeah, we do assist them with what we use, sanitizers, the gloves, the masks. They are also as susceptible as other people. That is what I want to report at this stage. I will give a chance to our coordinator at the province to answer some of the questions, and also to Colonel Foso to also answer some of the questions. Thank you, Chairperson.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairperson, honorable members. The issue pertaining to the access to the courts have been addressed with the Department of Justice, and the regional manager have made contact with the various court managers to allow access to the courts for the victims or the applicants for domestic violence protection orders, as well as to the volunteers. Pertaining to the matter of good court domestic violence related cases or the application for protection orders for that specific court are dealt with by the court in Bishop Lavis. So they are, or there is service to those members that would normally make use of the good court. As the General have already said, the members pertaining to the victim support volunteers, our members are fully trained in domestic violence, and some of our members are trained in victim support or the victim empowerment program. So the volunteers are just a force multiplier, but the primary function or the responsibility are on that of our members, and that function is performed by our members that are on duty at the station if the need arises. Pertaining to the cases also, you have the complainant has the choice in terms of the Domestic Violence Act. The complainant has the choice whether she wants to open a case docket, apply for protection order, or both. And in many cases, the complainant do not want to open a case docket. She just wants to report the matter to the police and then afterwards apply for a protection order. So it's the choice of the complainant that the complainant exercises, and it is not the discretion of the police to decide whether he or she wants to open a case docket.
Honourable Chairperson, honourable members, just in terms of the issue of the gender-based violence, I think one must understand that there's a difference between the Domestic Violence Act or domestic violence and that of gender-based violence. Gender-based violence is a much broader terminology. In terms of domestic violence, there's a definition in the Act that determines the domestic violence relationship. With the gender-based violence, which is not under discussion at this particular session, there do not have to be a domestic relationship between the persons that is entering into that argument or into the situation. That is why, in terms of domestic violence being such a serious situation, we have got a specific act that guides us how to deal with that. That is also one of, if not the only, then one of the only acts in our country that there is a criminal offence against the member if the member does not act. in terms of the specific guidelines within the Domestic Violence Act. Thank you very much.
Also, the other matter is the prioritization of the cases at court. That is determined by the Department of Justice and not the South African Police Service. In terms of the regulations issued to the Department of Justice, they were then mandated in terms of which cases must be heard and not, and that is not, as I say again, the decision of the South African Police Service.
Thanks, Madam Chair and honorable members. We think we have covered all the questions. If there's any that we'd left out, we would appreciate if we can be reminded. Thank you.
Thank you very much, General. There will be another round of questions, time permitting. I'm going to hand over then to Minister Fernandez or to Dr. McDonald to answer the questions posed to them. And then I must just apologize to Mr. Jordan. I used the wrong surname for you after your presentation. My apologies.
It's all good, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. With your permission, HOD Dr. McDonald will lead the responses. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll go through the responses in the order that the questions were asked. The first question was about that a lot of work being done by the NGOs through the shelters for victims of domestic violence and gender-based violence, and also for older persons and other services. So the question was, how do we reach or support an older person who's living in a community who's not linked to an NGO or a shelter or any other institution? I think there's quite a few systems in place, but during this lockdown it's been a little bit more difficult because we normally have the older persons clubs operating in a number of communities where older persons can go to participate in various activities such as active aging and exercise activities, social clubs, and also to access food. During this period, those older persons service centres have been closed by direction, and as a result, we then have to look at other ways of assisting. And one of those is that food can be delivered to the older persons. Meals on Wheels and other organizations are assisting with that, which normally service the older persons clubs and service centers. And also the Department of Social Development's local offices are also available to assist older persons in terms of the Older Persons Act where their assistance is required. SASSA is also continuing with the payment of grants, and they are increasing their grants next week. And so there is still support for older persons living in communities, but it is more difficult now with the closure of non-residential services that are normally available to older persons in communities. The local offices of DSD do remain open, however, so people can call our local offices if they need assistance in any way. And then, of course, there are also a number of social service NGOs that are rendering support services to older persons, including to address things like elder abuse that are available as well telephonically and can be called in to assist older persons where required. The second question was about shelters and the minimum cost of running a shelter per month. The funding model we have currently is that we fund at a rate of 2,300 Rand per bed in those shelters. And so if you've got 10 people or 10 beds in a small shelter, then the minimum would be around about 23,000 Rand for the bed spaces. And then additionally, we pay something towards the salary of a house mother and a social worker at the shelter to provide psychosocial support services. And so that would also be factored in. So if we look at the minimum cost of running a shelter, it really depends on the number of bed spaces. And generally, we try not to fund shelters with too few bed spaces, because otherwise it doesn't make sense in terms of the cost of also having a social worker and house mother present. But in the shelter buildings that we have obtained from the National Department of Public Works, or that we are in the process of obtaining from them, those are all going to be quite small shelters, but they will still be useful because of where they're situated, and because there's nothing else available in those areas. But most of them are residential properties, so they will probably also be looking at about 10 or so beds in each of those. In terms of the question regarding the older persons residential facilities, and what assurance do we have that they are in place, that those safety measures are in place that are required for the purpose of preventing COVID-19's transmission into those residential old age homes. Before the lockdown began, old age homes actually had already started with those measures. I think it was from sometime during mid-March. So there was training given by the National Department of Health and the Department of Social Development for the nurses that work in those homes to guide them on the necessary COVID prevention measures. And our staff have done some spot checks during that period leading up to the lockdown. But since the lockdown has begun, we are not allowed to visit those homes because no visitors are permitted into the homes, which is to ensure that nobody brings the virus into the homes. As Mr. Jordan had mentioned in his presentation, so far, we have not had any outbreaks of COVID-19 in any of the homes that we fund. There has been one case in a retirement village, which we do not fund, but it was contracted by the older person when they went to the supermarket, and that same supermarket was closed because of cases at that supermarket. Fortunately, containment measures were put in place and no other residents in the home contracted the illness. And a similar incident occurred also in an old age home that's run in the Cape Metro. Also, the containment measures were put in place, and so the resident who contracted COVID-19 did not pass it on to any other residents in the home. So we are grateful for that. In terms of the question about what is going to happen in Strandfontein, unfortunately, the legislation that was passed nationally to address the question of older persons, rather homeless persons, being placed in temporary shelters during the lockdown, it was not clear about which agency of government is responsible for doing that. And it was also not clear about details such as may the people leave those sites to go, for example, to the shops or to access medical care. So with that lack of detail has come quite a lot of uncertainty about what is required in those spaces. I think there's also a concern, and quite legitimate concern from the health authorities about the very principle of putting people together into a shelter in conditions where the general approach has been to try to decongregate people rather than congregate people. So I think the shelters, the emergency shelters for homeless adults, has been a contentious area because it does not seem to lend itself to reducing the risk of virus being spread. And I think that is also one of the reasons why the police have been quite reluctant about letting people come in and out of the shelters freely, because because obviously that greatly increases the risk of people going out and coming back in with the virus. And then, of course, you would have a risk of a spread happening in that shelter. Those shelters are temporary in nature, so they are certainly not ideally kitted out for a long-term stay. And I think the longer that the people are staying in these shelters, the more difficult it's becoming. But our social workers have been visiting the Strandfontein site and other sites periodically. They've visited at least 5 times or 6 times since the beginning of April to assist with various individual cases, as well as to intervene in a case of a rape that occurred early on in the establishment of Strandfontein in particular. And they have also removed a number of vulnerable persons to a smaller shelter site that was set up in the Somerset West area to accommodate more vulnerable persons and families together, and for the duration only of the lockdown period. I think the plan moving forward is something that the city of Cape Town would have to be asked to provide inputs on, because they have taken on the role of setting up the site and arranging all of the logistics. The National Department of Social Development provides food at the site through a national tender, and the Provincial Department of Social Development provides psychosocial support services and statutory intervention services as required to persons in the shelter when we are called in to do so. And I think that that situation is the status quo now, but the South African Local Government Association, SALGA, has written a letter to the National Department of Social Development indicating that it is their view that the running of these shelters is not a local government mandate in terms of the Constitution, and that it is in fact something that falls or should fall within the Department of Social Development area of responsibility. In turn, the National Department of Social Development.
Speaker, point of order.
Apologies, Dr. McDonald, if you wouldn't mind just holding for a moment. We have a point of order. Honourable Maria, what's your point of order?
Are you going to allow Mr. McDonald to take up the rest of the meeting so that there's no more time for the rest to ask follow-up questions?
Well, there are quite a number of questions, so I think we do have to give him the opportunity to respond. We're still doing okay for time, and I think he's probably almost onto your input now, Honourable Marie. So let's proceed. I'm watching the time. Thank you. Dr. McDonald, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. I will try to speak faster. The SALGA correspondence has triggered a discussion at national level about whose role should be to take on the responsibility of assisting the homeless, particularly during the lockdown, but also thereafter. And we are waiting for further direction from the national level. But at this stage, the National Department has indicated to us that the 20 billion rand that is being made available to municipalities in terms of the President's announcement of COVID relief, particularly disaster relief funding to municipalities, should be assisting with the operation of the shelters. So I think we ourselves are also seeking some legal advice about what our roles should be. But the legislation, both in terms of the regulations for the lockdown and generally, is actually silent on government's roles and responsibilities in terms of homeless adults. And I think it's also very challenging in the sense that the restriction of movement of homeless persons, it is unclear where that can be, or should I say, restriction of movement to a particular site, how that is actually justified, since it's effectively a form of incarceration. And I think that it's a problem that we're also seeing with our facilities for victims of gender-based violence and substance abuse, because we now have people who are in law informed that they may not leave, but they actually have homes to go to in many instances. We have also interviewed a number of people in the shelter at Strandfontein, and approximately 800 of them indicated that they would actually like to stay in shelter during the lockdown, and several hundred others have said they actually want to be reunified with families or like to go elsewhere. So there's various different views, and I don't think all of the people in that shelter can be treated in the same manner. I think there's many different needs and many different opinions among the people who are staying there. When we come to the question about from the ACDP, I think it was a similar question, so I think I may have covered that. In terms of what happens when a person leaves a shelter, I think the answer is the law is unclear, but there are a number of shelter options available, and where we can, we provide assistance. We do fund to the full extent that we can within our budget. We do fund a number of shelters to provide assistance. As does the city with the money that they put into this, but there are some people who do not wish to stay in the shelters, and we have seen in the streets. There are many people on the streets now who are homeless and who are staying on the streets again. So I think there's a need for tighter or clearer legislation around this that would help us a lot. I think the last question then around the removal of a person or husband in terms of the Domestic Violence Act. The SAPS was correct in stating that there is not a mechanism in terms of the Domestic Violence Act to remove an abusive husband, assuming it's the husband that is the abuser. But the Children's Act does actually provide for the removal of an abuser from a home. So if a child is being abused, the Children's Act actually states that a court may grant an order that the abuser must be removed from the premises. I believe there was a test case of that recently, but the PI Act came into conflict with it, the Prevention of Illegal Eviction Act. So it's another area where legislation or legislative work needs to be done, because I think it is a very sensible measure, and I think it should be put into place. But if it does conflict with the PI Act, then that would become an illegal eviction. So there has to be some clarity about which piece of legislation prevails. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McDonald. Members will have a final round of questions in 1 minute. I'm going to, as usual, start with the DA.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I'm mostly covered by the extensive explanation by Dr. McDonald on shelters and the operations. Thank you very much, Dr. McDonald. I just want to know the working together with the various departments. You have also made mention of the areas of responsibility. What is the working relationship and the support from national government in this instance? And also, are the shelters in the province, are you secure? Are you happy that they are adequately capacitated at this moment? I also wish to ask, Chairperson, with reference to support to children, specific to child-headed households, has the department received any information on such? What does the report say, and what is the support to those households, Chairperson? And then also secure care centres. Does the department have any report on that as well? Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you, Honourable Philander. I recognise the ANC.
Chairperson. Thank you, Chair. Okay.
Is that Honourable Windvogel? Please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, I heard from the HOD the involvement of the department regarding the Strandfontein issue, but I still need to know the view of the MEC, because I am a bit disappointed in her silence if it comes to the issue of the Strandfontein. Remember, she is the protector of those most vulnerable people. So that's all. Thank you, Chair.
Are there any other final questions from the ANC?
Yes, Chair.
Is that Honourable Nkondlo?
Yes, Chair.
Please proceed. You have 30 seconds.
two questions. One, can I get more information on the Somerset West shelter, whether it says it's 120, is it fully operational? Where is it? Somebody who is deployed in that constituency. The last one, Chair, in the support for children at risk during lockdown, can I just understand, is there anything that has been done to date for those, especially from those who were affected from the retail shops with their kids, from Danone and others, including, I think, the victim in Kailija who got to be evicted by the landlord, and she had, I think, children also. Has the department supported those? If not, will the department follow up on those cases and actually help those families that are at risk because of having been affected? Thanks.
Thank you. The EFF, Honourable Trejo. Good, Honourable Heron.
Thanks, Chair. I'm also a bit frustrated with the response around Strandfontein, which I think has had a lot of public attention since it was set up about 5 weeks ago. In response to the question about the gates are opening to that camp as we speak, according to video. According to correspondence, the proposal by the city is to shut this camp down from this weekend and start moving people out. But we don't have a clear answer from the department as to where they're going. I mean, we're aware of Selga writing to the ministers asking for clarity or debate as to who's responsible. But the city took responsibility for providing shelter, and other cities and towns around the country have done so too. And I don't think that the department can sit back and just say, well, it's not clear who's responsible, the gates are open, and that's it. I mean, I think we need to know what interventions are in place to provide shelter to those people, because the regulations require it. And if the state comes back and says the Department of Social Development National will now take over shelters, then that's how the transition should take place. But at the moment, I mean, we've got a lot of words, but not a lot of explanation as to what is going to happen practically. And it started already today with the gates open and people leaving, and where are they going and who's going to take care of them. Thank you.
Thank you. ACDP, Honourable Christians.
Thank you, Chairperson. Just a question. Many of those people in temporary shelters do qualify for this 350 Rand grant that is made available. Are they being assisted when they're in the shelter? How does that work? What is the department doing about, those people that do qualify for the 350 Rand grant? Thank you, Chair.
Freedom Front Plus, Honourable Murray.
There you are. It's very interesting that I heard Mr. McDonald say the PI Act prevents them from removing the husband. That means the PI Act is now in contradiction to the Constitution that says that the interest of the child is always paramount. How will the children be negatively affected, and also the rights of women? Now, I know there's a PCC. Have they never thought of letting regulations make provision for this? Because the way I understand regulations, it's power devolved by the legislature to a minister to do whatever he likes to achieve certain objectives. So we have regulations which can circumvent certain existing laws, or also in a way modified. And then I want to know chronic medication at old age homes. What assurance can you give us there are sufficient stocks of chronic medication at old age homes, at clinics and day hospitals? Because on our visit to Laingsburg, there was none. Bishop Lavis complained to me, there's none.
Thank you.
And Elsie's River complaint they can't get. So can I please get a response whether you have made provision for chronic medication at hospitals and old age homes, and whether regulations can make provisions that you can have the right to remove the offender if there's domestic violence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Murray. I think there was only one question to the SAPs on the 10111. General Matakata, are you in a position to answer that? I don't think there were any others, but if there are, if you'd like to respond to those, and then we'll move to the DSD. We would like to wrap up this portion of the meeting by 4 o'clock, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The question was from the first round on 10111, and we did explain that the members or 10111 as such will be operational as from tomorrow, having members back. But in terms of the telephone calls, it never been stopped. They were just relayed to the clusters for people to still to get access to the police. So that was what we can say, and as has been said earlier about 10111. From tomorrow, the members are back at 10111. Thank you.
Thank you, General. And then move over to you, a Minister or HOD from Social Development.
Chairperson, I think there was one question directed to me by the Honourable Windvogel, and as I said on Thursday, the situation is not ideal. It was imposed upon provinces by a national declaration, and I was in a mid-MEC with many other MECs, and we all agree that the situation is not ideal. However, we are waiting on resolution because there does seem to be some conflict. I can confirm that DSD has actively been supporting these sites with psychosocial support and so we haven't just stood back. The other question is, I think, about Somerset West. That's up and running, and I'm certain HOD MacDonald will talk to it. We already have 90 people in there. I do want to also just acknowledge Minister De Lille for handing over the 6 properties from Public Works, so we can now get shelters established in our rural areas, which is much needed. Thank you, Chairperson. I hand over to Dr. MacDonald.
Thank you, Chairperson. So just going through the questions, the first one being, what is the support and working relationship with National Social Development on the COVID lockdown? We are in regular contact with the National Department, and the National Minister also has held a MINMEC discussion this week as well in advance of the level 4 processes that are going to be kicking in at the end of this week. I think that the National Department has had to focus very heavily on trying to sort out the COVID grants because I think they've got a lot of funding now for that. And there's a massive urgency across the provinces to get that going, because the provinces and the municipalities and the NGO sector have tried to hold the line in terms of getting food support out to the people who need it, but it's not enough. If you look at the amount of money that are required versus what the provincial and municipal budgets can accommodate, that is why 50 billion is being made available for the country, which is close to the entire budget of the Western Cape, because the need is so enormous. So I think they've been very consumed with that, and we've been trying to support them with that as far as possible. But I think that the downside has been that the directions side of things has been lacking in some crucial detail, which we have alerted them to, and they are busy preparing some revised material that hopefully will provide some more clarity on things like movement of children. We know that's already something that's been addressed in the regulations, and also things like the roles and responsibilities in terms of the temporary shelters for homeless adults, as well as more detail about what can be done for people who are staying in shelters, and other kinds of things like provision for exercise opportunities for older persons and so forth. So there's a lot of technical work that's going on, and I think we've tried to be as much in communication as possible. I think the one area that we are concerned about, and it has been raised with the National Department of Social Development, is the fact that the SASO local offices remain closed. at a time when we really need them more than ever, certainly in the time I've been in this space. And even if they are opened as call centers and don't take walk-in clients, it would go a very, very long way to assisting us with the current crisis, because there's a whole workforce practically that is unable to assist. And I think it's been a big struggle both for us and also for the leadership of SASA, who've been trying to maintain services during this time. The second question, which it was a little, I didn't quite catch in full. It said something to the effect that, are we satisfied with that shelters are adequately capacitated? I wasn't sure whether that was with reference to the shelters for homeless adults or whether it was the shelters for victims of violence. I'd request maybe if the chair could assist me with clarity on which one was referred to.
Honourable Philander. Honourable Philander, can you clarify which shelters you were referring to?
To which question is Dr. McDonald referring to?
You asked whether the shelters were adequately capacitated.
Yeah. Now, I was referring to the homeless shelters, Chairperson, and as well as the shelters for victims of violence.
Oh, so both. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chairperson. Apologies for that. The shelters for victims of violence are quite structured in terms of what's required, and where we're funding those organizations to render those shelter services, we do believe that they are well capacitated, although that they can certainly be better capacitated if we had more money to enable that. And we do know that the shelter movement has raised their concerns about the adequacy of funding given by government to run those shelters. But if we look at where we're at in terms of the funding benchmarks in the Western Cape, they are significantly higher than most other provinces. In fact, higher than all other provinces. So we have tried to increase the funding as far as we can to ensure that they are adequately capacitated. As for the shelters for homeless adults, the shelters that we've already been funding prior to this, we do fund them to assist them. We don't fully fund them to run the shelters, and they are struggling a bit. They are quite full, and in many instances are struggling to find space. I think also the temporary shelters have been quite challenging for the municipalities as well, Strandfontein being the most challenging given its size, but I think all of the municipalities are having difficulty with that, given that they were set up very fast. And also given that this is not an area that the municipalities normally work in. They have had some assistance from the shelter organizations in terms of guidance and support, which has helped them, I think, achieve some degree of improvement since the lockdown started. According to our social work reports, the Strandfontein situation has improved significantly from the time that it was first set up to the time now, but they are still very much temporary in nature, and they are definitely not conducive to a longer stay. So I would certainly support those shelters being decentralized or smaller shelters being established if that's something that can be done. But it is difficult during the lockdown to arrange something like this and move large numbers of people, given that we are actually trying to avoid having lots of people moving around. So it's a bit of a dilemma, but I think when coming back to the question from Good, what is the plan going forward? I think the city has been working on those plans, and they might be able to give better guidance than we can, because they are working out the budgets and working out the logistics. And I would certainly not be in a position to second guess what it is that they are doing. But in terms of our specific role, we will continue to play the supportive role, and we'll continue to operate the shelters we do fund. And where there's difficulties, we will work with the city and with the SAPs to try and address those things as we have done. I think that going forward, what is clear is there's definitely a need for closer collaboration between social development at the province, the municipalities, and the SAPs in terms of how these shelters are set up. And I think also the process of having a national tender for food at the shelters has been quite clumsy. I think it would have been better if money was transferred to municipalities or provinces to actually administer the food side of things at the shelters, so that we don't have all these different players in the same space. Because once you've got 3 or 4 different government agencies trying to run one space, it becomes easy for things to go wrong, because it's too many cooks in the kitchen, so to speak. The question about the information on child-headed households, yes, we do collect information on child-headed households, and we have prioritized those households with food support. There are not a large number in this province, as opposed to some of the other provinces, particularly where there's a lot of child-headed households in rural areas. But in the Western Cape, there's not many. We can certainly make that information available if the committee so requests. The question regarding the status of our secure care centres and whether we have anything to report on that front. Yes, the secure care centres have been free of COVID-19, thankfully, during this period. The shelters, or should I say the secure care child and youth care centres, have been running as per usual, but with the same rules that we mentioned earlier, that they are not permitting visitors, and new admissions are being made to an empty site so that the new admissions don't come into contact with the existing population until they've been through a period of quarantine, so that we don't risk bringing the virus into the main centre. So I think if there's a request for a report, we can certainly provide one, but as it stands at the moment, they are running as per usual with full staff complement, and we have not had any incidents of infection. The question about the Somerset West shelter site, the site is at the former Altina school in Somerset West. So it's a former Altina, spelled Altena, school situated in Somerset West. If the member would like the address and further details, we can certainly provide that offline. And the site is fully operational, as the MEC has mentioned. And then the question about support for children at risk during the lockdown, particularly regarding evictions. I think we would need to get the details of the individual case so we can check whether it's something we've worked with, or if not, so we can follow up on it. Because I don't know exactly what those cases involve. I mean, we have dealt with, as you see in our presentation, a large number of child protection cases during the lockdown period. So I wouldn't be able to tell you which one is involved. So if the member could provide us more info, then maybe we can check if it's been dealt with, or otherwise follow up on it if not. The last question about, or from the question from the ACDP about will people be assisted in the shelter regarding access to the COVID grant. The COVID grant process is going to be finalized on, or should be up and running, I believe, by Monday. And once that is ready, that information is going to be disseminated everywhere, and we will certainly make sure that the shelters also share that information on how to access that. It will be through mobile phone technology or through call center technology, as far as I understand it. But we cannot distribute information yet until SASSA indicates that they're ready for that information to go out and start to receive the applications. I think one thing that was flagged as well is access for the people at Strandfontein to social grants, and that is something that we need to look at next week, because the access to grants is going to be critical for many of those people. So that's something that we need to see how we can assist with, and allow people to go and get those grants. In fact, it should be the case that from a rights perspective, people who are in shelters should be able to go out for essential purposes in the same way as people who are staying in their own residences. But of course, the difficulty is when you have a very large number of people and they all want to move in and out, there's a significant increase in the risk of infection. So I understand the balancing act that the SAPS and the city have to perform on that front. The last...
We're running out of time for this portion of the meeting. So if you could wrap up, please.
Sure. The last question was on the question of chronic medication at old age homes and whether there's sufficient stocks. The Department of Health is the supplier of chronic medication to the clinics and hospitals, and the old age homes access their stock through those means. We haven't had any complaints thus far from the homes that we fund. But I can't speak for the clinics or the day hospitals. And then the PI Act question, I think, is a question that comes to or relates to national legislative processes. So I can't really comment on that other than to say that I think the test case probably would be referred back by the judiciary to the legislature for consideration in terms of the conflicts between the legislation.
Thank you very much, Dr. McDonald. So that concludes then the portion of this meeting with presentations by the South African Police Service and the Western Cape Department of Social Development. I'd like to thank both departments very much for their participation in our meeting this afternoon. You're most welcome to leave the meeting at this stage. Members, we're going to take a short 5-minute break. Please do not leave the meeting. Just put your microphone on mute and your camera off, and we will then reconvene at 16:10 with a presentation from the Unemployment Insurance Fund and the Social Security Agency. We will see you in 5 minutes at 16:10. The meeting is now paused. Thank you. Good afternoon. It is now 10 minutes past 4 and we resume this ad hoc committee on COVID-19 for the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. Members, I'd like to welcome Mr. Maruping, who is the National UIF Commissioner, who is joining us on the line today. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, sir. Welcome. Mr. Maruping, are you on the line?
Hi, Honorable Venga, I'm on the line.
Be welcome, sir. Would you like to introduce the members of your team that are joining us today, please?
Okay, I'm with Mawele Ntamo. He's based in Cape Town. He's the person responsible for provincial office or provincial operations for the province. And then I'm with Tiamo, who will be running through the presentation, and myself.
Thank you very much. We will have your presentation first, and then we also welcome Mr. de Graaf from the Western Cape SASSA office, who will present after you, and we will take questions at the end of the presentation. So thank you very much, Mr. Maruping.
Okay. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you. And we can see you.
Oh, you can also see me. That's good. Okay, I'm not going to go through all the slides, but I'll go through specific slides, assuming that the presentation has been read. On slide number 5, what we are highlighting there is our normal benefits that we've processed to date. We have our main processing office is sitting in Cape Town, then we have another processing office sitting in George. And our labor centers are also functioning. Mr. Ntamo will add there if I'm missing something. As I'm speaking to you now, we've already paid 20.8 million rands in the yes. If you compare the numbers, on the 29th, on the 28th, we paid 14.8 million rands, and on the 29th, we've increased by an additional 6 million rands that we are paying. This is just a reflection that we are continuing to process our ordinary benefits to the benefit of the Cape Town people, so that they are not left stranded with UIF benefits as on that area. On the COVID-19 space, we started with our COVID-19 tears at labor.gov.za initially when we started with our processing, where people would send an email to that email box and will process manually. But over time, we've migrated to an automated solution where people can go online and apply for our benefits. And I can confirm now that we are able to pay at worst within 48 hours and at best within 24 hours. We have also launched our toll-free number where people can call if they have concern about their claims or they need to follow up. It's on page 6, the 0800 030 007. And also on page 7, oh yes, this is page, yes. If you go to page 6, wow.
Sorry, so if you just hold on one moment, sometimes it takes a little long for the presentation. There's a bit of a lag. So now we're on page 6. You said that there was the information on the contact details on slide 6. So all the members can now see that.
Yeah. This is just how the things have unfolded. That we started with an email account where people could send. Then over time, we migrated to an automated solution where people can apply online and everything happens online. And with that online solution, we are able to pay within 24 hours at best, and at worst within 48 hours. But we also have a toll-free number where if there's anything that you are not satisfied with or you need to make follow-ups, you can phone the 0800 030 007. But again, on the online platform, you are able to check your claim that you've made as a company to see where you are in the process. We have a status option We also have an option where if we have paid you a money, you are able to check which employees we've paid and which ones we have not paid. It also gives you a status of each employee and how much you must pay to each employee once you've transferred funds to the company. Maybe just to track back, what we've tried and do during this COVID-19 space, because we are aware that we will not have capacity as UIF to process 16.1 million applicants in our labor centers. That's one area. The second area, we also are aware that we need to support the country's agenda of social distancing so that we don't have too many people at our labor center picking up and thereby spreading the disease. And that's why we took the move that companies must apply on behalf of their employees so that UIF will pay the company and then the company will pay the employees. In that way, we limit infection, but we also ensure that there's a speedy payment to the employers, to the employees. And there's a balancing act there that you're also able to manage risk and control any possible fraud because the employer takes full responsibility of the payments that we make to them, and then they pay their employees. I'm going to hand over to Siamo to talk to us about the stats on page 8.
Afternoon, honorable members. Like the commissioner indicated on slide number 8, here we are talking about the ordinary benefits that we've processed since the pronouncement of the lockdown since the 26th until yesterday, which was the 29th, where we've processed 62,000 claims were processed at the tune of 1 billion rand. So it shows that even though we are dealing with COVID, our normal claims are not suffering. We are busy paying the claims. And then also on the next slides, if you go to slide number 9, where the statistical information that shows the sectors that are mainly impacted on the claims. If you check under the personal services, that's where we receive most of our claims, as well as the trade sector. That's where most of our claims have been coming from during this period. On slide number 10, under the payment per provinces, only for Western Cape, we have the employers that have applied for the COVID-19 on our online platform that have applied to date, where after the solution went live on the 14th of April to date, we've managed to process 77,801 companies that had 110,729 employees at the tune of 4.4 billion rands. This is the money that we've paid to date under our COVID-19 benefit. And then also on the last slide, slide number 11, these are sector industries where our claims have been coming from. If you check the Western Cape, it's sitting at number 2 after Gauteng in terms of the COVID-19 claims. So we will pause here for questions and comments.
Chair, let me hasten to add also that the process has not been without challenges on its own. And the most prominent challenge that we've had was with our call center, where the volumes of calls coming through were way over what we had anticipated. There were points where we were receiving about 74,000 calls in one instance, and we had the team from Haramvi coming on board. They've given us 500 call center agents so that we're able to attend to the calls as they come through. Let me pause at that, Chair, and allow my Western Cape colleague to add.
Thank you. Please proceed. Who is going to be speaking specifically on the Western Cape?
Mr. Ntamo. Okay, let's continue. I think we've covered sufficient ground.
Okay. Mr. Ntambo, are you on the line? No. Maybe he'll return. But in the interim, is that the presentation for now?
Yes, it is a presentation for now.
Okay, thank you. So we will then proceed to welcome Mr. de Graaff, who's the Acting Regional Executive Manager for SASSA in the Western Cape. Mr. de Graaff, thank you again for joining us and our standing committee this week. If I could hand over to you for some introductory remarks in the presentation, please. If I could then ask that all other participants to turn off their cameras, which will assist with us having a more stable line.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon to all the honourable members. It's really good to be back and to make the second presentation to the committee. Madam Chair, I have been notified that we have 10 minutes, so I'll speak to the main points in the slide. Madam Chair, just in terms of our call centre, up till now we have received 10,447 calls coming through. That's a balance that we have at this particular stage. Now, these calls will be eradicated in next week, because what I've done at our regional office for all the managers and for the senior managers, we have given them 300 names each, and we have 30 here at the regional office, and all of them will have to phone each one of these persons in next week, so that at least we can eradicate the call center backlogs. The call center with a limited number will then be in the position to field the incoming calls. So that's a plan that I have in place to eradicate the backlog. On our food parcel distribution, Madam Chair, you can see for this week we distributed 3,128. And I must say, Madam Chair, that we did experience some challenges. For example, I've just been notified in Oudtshoorn where they scaled the fence and took some of the items. We had to stop the distribution of the food parcels in Hermanus, and now those persons the identified persons will have to come to our Caledon office. I want to make this point to the honourable members that we processed the 5,642 food parcels up till now with voluntary members, as I've indicated last week, and we could secure 170 from 700 SASSA staff in the Western Cape to help with the procurement of these food parcels and to be at the offices when the beneficiaries would come and collect these food parcels. And we will continue our processes. Hopefully it will be better next week when our offices reopen on the 4th of May. But I think the honourable members must take note of the fact that, based on the instruction also from the President and from our head office, that during the week 1/3 of the members of our staff will be in the office on a particular day, and to adhere to the President's instruction. But we will see how best we can manage that. Let me move on, Madam Chair. We are commencing with the grant payments on the 4th of May. On the 4th and the 5th, we will then start with the older persons, and the grants for persons with disabilities. Then on the Wednesday, we will commence with all the children's grants. Where the older persons will have a combination of grant, for example, the older persons grant with the child support grant or any children's grant, that will be paid with the older persons on Monday and on Tuesday. And we have seen the last time when we indicated that we will start paying on the 30th, that those in receipt of the children's grants also came on the 30th because a mistake that we made, we didn't separate the file. Now the file has been separated. So the beneficiaries for the children's grant can go and try. There will not be money for them on the 4th and on the 5th, but their money will be available from the 6th. I need to bring to the attention of the honourable members that in future we will start paying then always on the 3rd day in the month for the older persons and the persons in receipt of a disability grant, and from the 5th then for the children's grants. So what's important also is to take note the value for the grants that will flow within to the Western Cape region. On the grants applications, we were asked to give an indication to the honourable members that on the numbers for the grant applications that we did not finalize. And Madam Chair, this is a breakdown for, it's 987. These are now applications that are on our system, but where we could not verify the application. And many of these beneficiaries will be coming back to our offices for the finalization of the applications. That's beside the number of new applications that will be coming to our offices. So we can already expect 1,000 persons to come to our offices in terms for the completion of the application. Madam Chair, I want to bring to the attention of the honourable members that the city has closed all the halls, and SASSA would use the halls where we would go for the completion of the applications. As long as the halls actually remain closed, these beneficiaries will have to come to the local offices, and it will put extreme pressure on our local offices with the 1/3 of the staff that will be there on a particular day. How we will try and manage that is through the appointment system. So as the persons will come, we will try to give them a date as to when they can come to our offices. That would prevent people from sleeping over, because if I know I have a day to come to the office, I know I will be helped on that particular day. In terms of the grant relief measures, the Minister did make the public announcement yesterday for the child support grant, the 300 Rand for the child support grant, and that per child, that will be only paid in May. From June, we will do away with the 300 Rand per child, and we will then pay 500 Rand per primary caregiver. That means even irrespective if you have 3 to 4 or 1 children, the primary caregiver will only receive the 500 Rand for the child support grant. For the other grants, it will be 250 that we will actually pay. That is now for the older persons grant, for the disability grant, the foster care grant, and the care dependency grant. Also, what the Minister made very clear yesterday, and I'm glad to share this information with the honourable members. The question was asked, is SASSA still going to continue with the food parcels? Nope. As soon as we start implementing the 350 special payment, That will be combined with the social relief of distress, and it will replace the food parcels as we are giving it out now. SASSA will still proceed with the food parcels until we get the go-ahead from our head office to stop with the distribution and the applications for the food parcels, because that will then be taken over by the 350 Rand, which will be given to the applicants for the social relief of distress as well as for the COVID-19 grants. That will continue for a period of 6 months. So in fact, what will happen, Madam Chair, the applicants for the social relief of distress will be in a far better position now, because the 350 Rand will continue for a period of 6 months, whereas currently they only receive one food parcel because of the limited funds that we have. The criteria is actually on the slide, as members can see. So what we have done, we got the list of all the South African citizens as well as the refugees who would qualify for social grant. So we have that approved list already from the Department of Home Affairs, and that will be our first check. Once the persons would actually be through all the criteria, we will then check them against first the list as we received it from the Department of Home Affairs. That will be done in the back office. We will take then that list that we also received and run it against SARS, against the UIF, and if the person would actually then qualify, we will make sure that the money then is paid into the accounts of the beneficiaries. We would prefer the applicants to have a bank account, but if they don't have a bank account, we are in the process of looking at an e-wallet, so that a person even in the remote areas, the rural areas, would be able then to receive that cash, go and buy some food, or perhaps draw the cash with the e-wallet. So the front end of the application process has already been completed. And I'm glad to say to the honourable members that in our EXCO meeting last night, the indication is that we will go live on Monday. We have the indication that it will be working already on Friday, but just to play safe, I actually, in terms of our broadcast, say on Monday, the system will go live through the WhatsApp process, where they dial the number 0600 123 456 in the very simple process. That's in terms of the WhatsApp process that we will follow. We're still finalizing the USSD number. That is now the number where star 125 that you will bet, hash, and then it will also take you through the process as well as the email process that we are finalizing. So applicants would be able to do it through WhatsApp, through the USSD number, which we are in the process of finalizing, and through emails. And we need to consider emails because there are a number of people who don't have cell phones. And if we work with the municipalities to provide access to persons where they can apply, that will help a lot, because we do not want to deny anybody the opportunity to apply for this special COVID grant. Madam Chair, once we have done all the checks and balances, we will then actually do the payments. Now, for the first round, we will start paying on the 15th of May. Now, the reason why we're targeting the 15th of May allows SASSA first to complete the payout of the grants for all the other beneficiaries throughout the country. Then we will be in a much better position then to start with the payment of those persons who already qualified then for the grant. Initially, we had the date of the 8th of May, but it has been pushed now to the 15th, just to allow us to get all our checks and balances in place. And The ACB, that's a private bank account, that's going to be an easier one for us because we're already doing payments through the ACB's private bank account holders, and depositing the money into those accounts shouldn't be a big problem then for us. The members can see all of the remaining information and on the slides, and I will make myself available for any other questions being asked by the members. We would appreciate the fact that if the honourable members would allow us perhaps to come back at a later stage just to provide more information, but more specifically just in terms of the special payments. Madam Chair, I don't know if you would allow me just to reflect on some of the questions that I was also asked to respond, but I'll wait for the response from Madam Chair now.
Thank you, Madam President. I think you're referring to the written questions that were sent to you following our last meeting. I think
that's right. That's right, Madam Chair.
Point of order. There is a terrible feedback. I hear the same person's voice twice.
Members, I think some members are using their phones as well as the platform. Is it better now?
Yes, Madam Chair, is better.
All right. We're now going to proceed to questions. I'm going to allow for 3 minutes for each party. If you would just indicate to which department your questions are directed, and we'll start with the DA.
Chairperson Deirdre Bartman speaking. Chairperson, can you hear me?
Yes, please proceed.
Okay. Chair, my questions are to the UIF. Firstly, regarding the length and complexity of the process to apply for benefits. The UIF indicated in their presentation that they've moved over to an online system where people can apply. I have personally emailed to the email address that the UIF has given to people, and it took 1 minute for the auto reply to come back, which was good, with the respective forms that you must fill in. But then upon research, it is regtig waar in Afrikaans 'n ellelange proses, and people don't have data. For example, the one document where you have to change your Excel to a CSV document is 12 pages. The online guide for how to use the website is 10 pages. Even the easy guide is 4 pages. So the actual application process takes about 17 steps, and not everyone has the data to be able to deal with that. And quite frankly, it's easier to understand the application of Pythagoras in the real world than it seems to be for application for the unemployment benefits. Further, for example, on the bottom of the documents you need to sign. So what if you can't scan the document? What if you don't have a printer? And in terms of the actual documentation that people have to submit, is it not possible for SARS to assist the UIF with certain information that's already available on their systems in order to bring the application process much shorter? For example, SASSA included things like WhatsApp and USD numbers. Is it possible for the UIF to also do that, for example? And in terms of the deadline of applications, the deadline seems to be today, the 30th of April. Will it be extended? If not, why not? Because there are sectors that will remain in lockdown with each level. And even if those particular sectors open again tomorrow, many of them will still need to apply for the benefits because month end is only today. Further, in terms of accountability of employers, how does the UIF ensure that money is paid out to the employer, that that money is used for the employees? How is that accountability occurring? Does the money go straight into the employee's bank account? Must the employee pay over? And how does the UIF monitor that? And for example, I've been reading reports about employers who have not paid their money over to the UIF, but the UIF money went off the respective employees' payslip, for example, or their money for that month. How is the UIF assisting with the protection? And do the employers have to then claim per month or all at once? And then further, in terms of informal traders, I just want to understand, how does the UIF assist someone who doesn't pay, isn't registered with the UIF? Does that fall under labor, UIF? Does it go to SASSA? How are people assisted? For example, there are many informal traders in the Mitchells Plain and Khayelitsha areas, and those two areas combined is the third biggest economy within the Western Cape. There are hairdressers, there are barbers who don't necessarily have access to the online platform. How are they being assisted?
Thank you, Honourable Barbara.
Okay, thank you.
Unfortunately, your time has expired. Thank you. I recognise the ANC.
Thank you, Chair. It's Member Nkondlo here. Hello.
Please proceed, Honourable Nkondlo.
Thank you, Chair. I think my chairperson of the committee has covered me very well on most of the questions, and I just want to add one question on the UIF application. Is that in the main, the applications that have been received, are there any applications that are done by the employees themselves, or are they allowed? Because there are cases of workers that have reported that their employers, are not willing, to apply for them, the UIF, and some of them have been laid off. So what is the response of the Department of Labour in that regard? And then, Chair, I'm not sure, do we move to SASSA or we can only stick to UIF?
You're welcome to pose questions to both.
Oh, thank you, Chair. On SASSA, can I just understand that from the total applications made, what is that number in the Western Cape of the total applications for food parcel that have been made versus the ones that have been approved and they've been already handed over? Again, have there been a consideration for students that are sitting in campus residences, given the fact that during the announcement of the lockdown, there were students, for example, in the CPUTs and UWC that are still sitting in those campuses? Is there a provision made to allow those students to apply for social relief, including food parcels? My last one, Chair, is that on the SASSA food parcels, including this special COVID grant, how has it been? What has been the loophole from SASSA point of view, since we got reports of politicization of the food parcels, by either councillors or whoever? I just want to understand, does SASSA, once the parcels have been approved, how do the councillors, are those given to councillors or they are invited when the food is being distributed? Because one is interested to understand what is this particular gap that is bringing, the politicians into, the food parcels that is given, through SASSA. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Honourable Nkondlo. I recognise Good.
Chair, my questions have been asked by others. Thank you.
Thank you. ACDP.
Thank you, Chairperson. Just the question. Somebody sent me a WhatsApp about 2 days ago about a small business, and I just want to know, is that the norm? A small business that had 10 employees, and they submitted all the forms. 2 came back and paid, but the others were not paid. And when they inquired, they said, and I'm just saying what they told me, it's done on a racial basis. Just tell me, what the answer they received, it was on a racial basis, that they pay out per what race you belong to. And that is, I need to go back to those people, because that is what was told to them. That's the first question. The second question is that specifically, and I heard about the hairdressers and all of that, those people are last in line when it comes to the levels for employment. And the one person then asked the landlord, listen, we're not getting full salary. Can we make arrangements? So people are not getting full salaries. People are only getting part of those salaries, and it's extremely difficult for those people that paid UIF, and they're still not making ends meet. I don't know how we going to resolve that, because I know there's a lot of laws and all of that, but people are intimidated and going to be put out of their places because can they just explain that again, the breakdown? How does it work? The payouts. I saw it somewhere, but I just wanted to pose that. And then to Mr. De Graaff, the problem that we have is that people cannot apply for social grants and all of those things because it's like we discussed the other day, it's not the essential service. So now only with a third of your staff going back and at your offices, not even at the city hall, there's enormous problems. There's going to be enormous problems. Please assure us it's not going to be chaos. Assure us, and I know you say you're going to try your best, but we need to get this thing right. People is going to go to your offices, a third of the staff. It's just not going to be payments. People want to renew their grants. There's a lot of stuff that's outstanding. In the Mitchell Spring people phone me all the time to say we need to apply for our grant and we can't do it now. So you're going to not have only the people coming, but you're going to have people coming for other inquiries as well. What are you going to do? And also that the halls is closed and people coming to office is going to be chaotic. So please give us a plan how you're going to do that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Freedom Front Plus.
Chair Lady, I think that I've never been so tired like I'm now, listening to all this debate for days on end. The one thing I can say for if the part and we don't, as soon as we learn to understand the one regulation, it's replaced by another regulation. And then if we just start to understand and read through all that, it's again changed. Now we have a situation where we had to, the municipality was involved, the councillors, they notified SASSA and gave names with all the details, information, and food parcels were delivered to people's homes. Then that, I believe, was put on hold. They're now going to have a voucher scheme. Then the voucher scheme, no, they're paying it directly into your bank. And as I don't blame Mr. De Graaff, this is national ministers who make TV announcements, and it's very confusing. Now we have a situation where people will get 350 Rand, but it's overlapped by the fact that we don't know how it's going to work at all. So now I ask, is food parcel still going to be delivered? The one person say no, the other one says, well, yes, we will deliver it until we get clarification on the 350 Rand. We don't know our arm from our legs. We don't know what's going on. And I want to express my greatest concern that both governments, provincial and national, has failed the people of South Africa. They didn't pass the test that they can handle a crisis as big as COVID-19. They miserably failed the test. That's all I want to say.
I'm looking at the time, members. We are not going to have time for a second round of questions. So what I'm going to do is just open to see if members have any final questions before we move to UIF and SASSA for responses. If you would like to pose a final question, please keep it to under a minute and start with your name. Are there any members that would like to pose a final question?
Thank you, Lorraine.
Yes, Chairperson.
Thanks, Chair. To SASSA.
Okay, I've heard Honourable Botha. We'll start with you.
Thank you. To SASSA, with regards to the staff, will the staff be sensitized to treat our people with dignity and not with attitude? And then in terms of the applications for the special COVID-19 grant, will the administrative task attached to it, will it be done per district office or via the provincial office? And the volunteers that you speak about, when will these volunteers start? And where will they work from your provincial office or per district? And from what database was this volunteers drawn from? And what is the cost for administering the 350 Rand grant payment per beneficiary head? And Mr. de Graaff, can we hold SASSA to the 15th of May for payout? Thanks, Chair.
Okay, who else?
Hello, Chair, Member Van Vogel.
Honourable Van Vogel, please proceed.
Yeah, Chair, my question is to the Department of Labour regarding the people who are already in payment. The SMS functionality system did not reach most people, especially the vulnerable and poor. Therefore, many people haven't received their UIF benefits. What are they supposed to do if all the regional offices are closed? Thank you, Chair.
Anyone else?
Chair, Member Smith.
Honourable Smith, please proceed.
Chair, just two questions. Maybe to the UIF, I noticed that they have opened the space for companies to apply for on behalf of workers for the benefits. Is there no potential risk involved? Because especially in your rural areas, you would find that workers are at home ever since the 26th of March. And companies apply on their behalf now, get the benefit, the money, and what mechanism is in place to ensure that the money actually reaches the beneficiary, because it is in actual fact a individual's money and not the company's money at the end of the day. So I just want to understand what is the risk involved, and how is the UIF certain that these monies reach the actual beneficial who sits at home? The second one is...
Sorry, your time has expired. I've asked members to keep it to under a minute. Thank you very much. I'm now going to hand over to Mr. Maruping. If you could please respond to the members' questions. Thank you. Sorry, Mr. de Graaff, would you mind unsharing the presentation, please? Mr. Maruping, are you on the line?
Chairperson, I'm here.
Thank you. You please proceed.
Okay. Chair, the first question from Honorable Botmans in relation to the complexity of the application on the system, where she was referring about the lengthy processes and then the documents and that we published on the website. The documents that we publish on the website, Chairperson, if on the one that takes you step by step, that has 12 pages. If you check every page, it has its own step. Like for instance, step 1, this is what you need to do, 1, 2, 3. And then for the CSV file, if you check the required field on the CSV file, it's more or less the same as the payroll. So it shouldn't be difficult for companies to complete the similar spreadsheet, which is in line with what is on the payroll and which it is what they submit to SARS when they declare their employees on the EMP2. And then as well, for the SARS part, for the employees that are not declared with the UIF, where the company has applied, and then we could not pick up the employees on our system. What we've engaged with SARS, part of it is that for those employees that were not declared with the UIF, we one of the things that we are requesting, because we need to make sure first that these employers did exist or did work for that particular company. So one of the requirements where the companies need to prove to us is to submit the EMP2 that they submit to SARS on a bi-yearly basis. On the deadline, Chair, we haven't pronounce on the deadline for the lockdown. As we all know that even though we are moving to level 4, there are industries that will still be under lockdown, that will be operating at level 2, at level 3. So we can't close. We haven't pronounced on the deadline for the application. So the application is still open until such time when we will announce. But at this stage, the applications are still open. On the accountability of to make sure that because the companies are applying on behalf of these employees, so to make sure that employers indeed distribute the monies to the employees. Like the first thing when you apply on our online platform, you sign the memorandum of agreement, which says that after the receipt of the money, the employer within 2 working days must distribute the money to the employees. And then after distributing the money to the employees, after the required time, they need to send us the proof to our dedicated email address, which is on the portal, where they need to indicate, to show us indeed they have paid the employees. Where they have not paid the employees within the required time, as we all know that when we transfer the money to these companies, they might accrue the interest if the money is sitting there for a period of 5 days. Now, if the employer, for instance, does not distribute within the required time, now whatever the interest has been accrued for that particular period, the employer will have to pay back the money. So we are indeed, after paying the employer, we are indeed following up, following the money so that indeed the employees receive this benefit. On the group, the vulnerable groups, especially on the rural areas, the employees can apply. If the company does not want to apply, knowing very well that the company was not complying with UIF, the employee can apply on our filing platform, which is 0 rated. It does not gonna cost you the data when you're using the UIF, the U-filing platform as an employee. And then just to brief members, we are still under the discussion to procure to use the mobile buses to these rural areas, where now we will go directly to them. Those that did not apply for this COVID, where they don't have data or maybe access to the online platform. So the discussion is still underway. And then those that are at least closer to the labor centers, like we indicated, there are drop boxes on the labor centers where employees can drop off the applications. The one that was coming from the FF Plus, the members that are already in the receiving the benefit payment, we've issued a directive last week, Thursday, on the 24th, late in the afternoon. That's why if you go to the slide number 5, the slide we started with, there is a reflection of saying, after the directive, we said people must not come to the labor centers, those that were already receiving the benefits, meaning because we know that we are still under lockdown, because on a monthly basis, they needed to come to confirm that they are they are unemployed. But we know during the lockdown, no one will get employment, since most of the companies are closed. So we took a decision as the department to process the payment for those clients that are already receiving the payment. So we're hoping that because if you check slide number 5, the numbers have doubled, and then to date we've paid about 980 million, of which on average per month we are paying around about 1.3 billion. So it's only a group of few people that we are still processing for those that were already in the payment. I thank you, Chair. I think I've covered all the questions.
Thank you, Mr. Maraping. And Mr. de Graaff?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and my apologies. I thought I closed my presentation.
No, that's all right.
That's all right. On the first question, we received approximately 30,000 names. And Madam Chair, we received those names from all over, from, as I indicated last week, from politicians, from all political parties, from community members, but then it becomes our responsibility to then work through those lists to check them against SOCPEN. And of those 30,000, Madam Chair, I can say that almost half of those persons we rejected because they are in receipt of a grant, whether it would be for the two children, whether it's a disability grant, but they would be in receipt actually of a grant. And what happened here? Everybody started applying, but we did our checks against SOCPEN. What our officials would normally phone each one of those persons, and they are in the process of that, completing the application, and then inform those beneficiaries that where they're successful, when they can come and collect the food parcels. What I will do, Madam Chair, is we have asked the officials, because we did receive the question in that regard also, to give the breakdown per local office as to how many applications are still at the office and against how many have we processed thus far. But Madam Chair, keep in mind, our head office has now asked us to submit all the remaining names now to the head office and for the processing of the 350 special payments for which these persons would also qualify. The second question, in terms of, I'm going to try and be quick, on the consideration for students on campuses of UWC or whatever university it would be, if they meet the qualifying criteria, and that is where they do not have food, do not have any income, and not getting a stipend from the National Student Financial Aid Scheme, then you will find that those persons will qualify. And that is why we accepted those lists actually, so that we can process them, contact the applicants and see if they do qualify. Once we receive the list, we process it from our side. From there on, there's no involvement actually coming from the councillors or the community leaders, because it's our processes, and we do not want any involvement or any influence actually coming from the different spheres of the communities. What the community leaders and councillors can do, because they would know the list that they have provided. Based on their list, they can ask, actually, they can make contact with our local officers and just ask for the outcome. They have the right in terms of that, because they submitted their own list, and they can ask for the feedback in that regard. On the question of the pressures on our officers, I fully agree with the honourable member. Our officers will be under pressure, and that is why I've mentioned the point of the halls, because we could have always taken some of the other staff members who will now be working from home and place them perhaps at some of the community halls where they could have helped to process the grant. And I've mentioned that specifically to see what the honourable members can actually do to help us, even if it's just for the social grants, to process those applications. And the honourable member is right. All of those members, the new applicants, those whose grants that we did not complete, they will come to our offices, and there will be a large number coming through. And to prevent persons from actually sleeping over, the best way that I can handle that is actually to give them appointments so that they know when they come on a particular day that they will be served by our officials. In terms of Mr. Marie's issue on the food parcels, yes, we will still continue giving out and processing the applications for the food parcels. We must do that if there's nothing in place and if the payment hasn't started yet for the COVID-19, because I cannot stop with the food parcels while people are suffering and the 350 Rand hasn't kicked in yet. Once that kick in, and I know it is working, then the instruction will be quite clear. They can now stop the food parcels, because by then we would have submitted all our lists to the head office for them to process the grants. I will at all times try to treat our beneficiaries with the necessary dignity and respect. And I appeal to the honourable members, where any of our officials would not treat any of the persons with dignity and respect, they're welcome to contact me, and I will follow up with that particular local office. In terms of the voluntary staff, remember the announcement was only made yesterday in terms of us working with the municipalities, trying actually to get those volunteers on board so that they can help the persons actually with the online application, not so much in terms of the USSD process, not in so much in terms of the WhatsApp, but more in terms of that email, because we take it for granted at times that we know the email, but our ordinary community member does not know actually how to work with that email, and we will actually have further discussions with the municipalities in that regard. Madam Chair, I can say just before this meeting, I had a meeting with all the district senior managers with our management here at the regional office to prepare them for what is going to come, to ask them actually to start liaising with the municipalities, so when the email is up and running from the head office side, that we can inform the persons, this is where you can go, this is where you can get assistance in terms of processing your application via email. The cost for the 350 Rand application process, that hasn't been finalized yet, because of the fact that there are still some elements, for example, the USSD, as I've indicated, that we still need to finalize, but I will liaise with the head office just to try and find out what is actually the cost for just paying out one 350 Rand. Keep in mind, the directive that will be signed by the National Minister on the COVID-19 payments, as soon as that is actually signed, it will give much better indication of what needs to be done and when it's going to happen. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. We have run out of time for this meeting, unfortunately. So members, I know there are some additional questions. As always, I will invite you to put them in writing to our procedural officers. We will then write to the relevant department for answers in writing. Mr. Maruping, thank you very much to you and your team for having been present today and for answering our questions. And thank you, Mr. Dupont, to you and you for having appeared for time before this committee and for answering our questions. We're very grateful. So to both departments, very well in the work that lies ahead.
Thank you, Chair.
We will be in touch in writing, if not in person. Thank you very much. You're welcome to leave the meeting.
Thank you.
Members, as I already mentioned, any supplementary questions can be sent via email to the procedural officers. There's just one item that I'd like us to clear, which is the program. We had some suggestions earlier this week about moving the SAPS and SANDF and correctional services to next week, which we've now done. So Wednesday's meeting then is programmed to be the outstanding items from SAPS, and with the inclusion of the SANDF and correctional services. Thank you, Ms. Klutter. So here we go, 6th of May, that will then be the briefing as discussed. And then as per input of members, we've moved education and learning forward to next Friday, with the issues, as you'll see under additional comments, which were compiled from the members' inputs when we started the program of the committee. Everything else then moves down a week. So the week thereafter, we will have disaster management and local government, followed by economic recovery, support and livelihoods. Another item is just about the timing of these committees. We want to synchronize this committee with the ordinary parliamentary program. So on Wednesdays, this committee will be from 1 until 4, as ordinary standing committees usually are, start at 1 o'clock. And on Friday, it will be at 2 o'clock, as per the normal parliamentary program committee time slots. I hope there are no objections to the program as is. And if not, then I would say thank you very much to all of you for your inputs and for the very robust questions that you've posed today. I wish you all a happy Workers' Day tomorrow, and we will see you next week, Wednesday at 1 o'clock. Thank you. Take care and be safe.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye-bye.
Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Yes.